Genève Monde, at the crossroads of history.
Tell me more about the meeting you had with the people within the federation. You told me about Samaranch, probably after it was Jacques Rogge.
Yeah, all the people I spoke with, they were, for the most part, they ran the federations, whatever sport they're in.
Yeah.
They gave the job of working with us to someone who was at loose ends there, but people who were cognizant of the fact that kids needed it. And it was my first heavy exposure to young kids. And I tell you, it didn't take many months and many camps. I was at about, by the middle of 94, I had been to 8 different camps all over the world, Asia and Africa and so on. Children are children, no matter where they are. And they all act the same. I was amazed. There was no difference between a kid in the middle of the Kenyan plains who came with his family or without family to a camp near the South Sudanese border than there would be kids the same age in Geneva. Or in New York State, where I grew up. Their kids need to play, and they need to do it in an organized manner. After a few months of kids playing football, a couple of kids asked if they could talk to me. I said, of course. And they came to me and said, well, thanks very much for bringing in the football, but there's something missing. What's missing? Well, we're playing in our clothes that we have here, which we don't have many of, and we don't have uniforms. So if you're playing football, I can't tell who's on my side. I see. So what you're asking me is to find you uniforms. Yes, please. In other words, football for them or basketball wasn't the same without something to identify the team. As a matter of fact, that's how we started with Nike. Nike was a big donor of ours. At a second camp in Kenya, near the Somali border, we had the Somalian refugees who escaped with family or without family to southern Kenya, to the camp, and they got into that camp, and the girls wanted to play volleyball. But the parents said, good Muslims, girls, the parents said, you can't play, the boys are looking at you. So, okay, what can we do? Well, it was more than that. They all wore their long clothing that they had for daily life. And I had someone from Nike at the camp. And I said, what can you guys do? He says, I'll come back to you. And he came back after a week or so. He said, our designers will design clothing for these girls that will meet their religious requirements. And not only that, but we'll give them the pattern, and we'll give them the material, and we'll give them the sewing equipment, and they can make their own. And they did. So all of a sudden you had the girls with clothing. And then it worked very well. And then if I move forward a lot of years, now we are in 2004, were the games in Athens. IOC decided at the camp we would make an appeal to the athletes, 10,000 athletes, world athletes, to give us their surplus clothing. And the clothing would go to teens in the camps around the world. Everybody agreed, and we made the collections there in Athens, informing different countries of what we were doing. I mean, for example, I remember very well we had the German Olympic team women call me up. Someone was running a women's sport, and they said, can we, the women who are on the team, can we come and deposit clothing into your depository where you will then pack it? And I said, of course. So I had 8 women show up. They were from the German rowers team. There were none that were much shorter than 6 foot. So we got equipment from them, and they got it from the rest of the people. And then the IOC and we decided, we had a donor who made someplace in the world plastic bags that were big enough to hold clothing. And we put one on every bed in the Olympic village of all the teams. And we got the clothing. So that was the beginning of a real cooperation with them. After that, I think was the UK Olympics. We did the same there. And then we were heading for 2016 now, which was the Games in Rio. And the Olympic Committee said, what are you going to do? They liked well enough the idea of the clothing, but they wanted something more inclusive for the refugee youth. And one of the women at the Olympic Committee that I worked with here in Lausanne said, why don't you see if you have good athletes in your camps? She asked. I just think they're normal children. I don't think we have anybody great. Together, we'll write a questionnaire. I got a questionnaire, and I sent it to every camp, 250 or 60 camps in the world. Mm-hmm. I sent it out, and the kids could fill it out themselves, explaining their prowess in sport. And I got 126 replies. Wow. In the world. My next job was to give all these questionnaires to the Olympic Committee. And the Olympic Committee called me up a week later and said, Mr. Marshall, I'm sorry, from the 126, we found 12 that may be good enough. I said, okay. Week later, they called and said, forget it. The 12 are not good enough. We said, I'd rather have none than embarrass those 12 young people, or embarrass the Olympic Committee, or embarrass UNHCR if you had a team. Because the idea would be you would have a team of refugee athletes who are competing against all countries' athletes, the 10,000 or 12,000 by this time that were in the Olympics.
Yeah, but that's not the spirit of Olympism.
Yeah,
right?
Except if you ran the 100-meter championship is a little less than 10 seconds. Yeah. And if you come in 20 seconds, you look pretty silly, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I mean, these kids were not trained.
But there's always a solution to train them somewhere else.
Yeah, well, then comes Thomas Bach, who was the president at that time. He had an opportunity to speak to the General Assembly of the United Nations in New York. And in 2015, you may remember we had this gigantic crossing of the Mediterranean of refugees who were in Turkey, for example, who got out of there, paying people to transport them, to get them to Greece or Italy. And Bach to the General Assembly because he was a normal human being like the rest of us. He read about the horrible situation of these young people and older people drowning in the rubber rafts where you should have 5 people and you had 20. And he said, we will mount in Rio a refugee team, probably remembering that we had 126 answers. He had the rest of the thing that wasn't his business to know about. So he said, we're going to have a team. And the lady at the Olympic Committee, maybe 15 minutes after Bach was through talking, she knew about it in Lausanne. I knew about it from her. And she said, what are we going to do, Mr. Marshall? We have no one who could be on a team. So I said, we have to look a little in a different way. We were looking for homegrown refugees. Homegrown means they were not at top of their world of athleticism, whatever they did, before they got to the camp. And then we were hoping at the camp they would learn something. No, not so. So I said, we have to look differently. And there was a solution that hadn't occurred to us before, and that many of these children who arrived at a camp in their teens were young champions in their age group in their country of origin before they had to flee. And we contacted them and we found athletes. Before we knew it, we had a number. And we told the IOC that here are 2 young women from Damascus, Syrians. They had fled. They came across in 2015, the Mediterranean. The 2 women I'm talking about are sisters, and their father happened to be a swimming coach. Oh. So, they were good. They were the best in the country at a younger age. Now, with those, you could work a little bit more easily to get them up. And the IOC said, we will spend the money to help continue to train them. If you have them in your camps, we'll get them together. And we got together about 25 refugees in taekwondo, in swimming, in judo, in running, and so forth. And the IOC spent the money to put them in camps with the best in the world, and they benefited from it. So finally, for Rio, we had 10 athletes, and it was our first Refugee Olympic team.
And I remember, the opening ceremony with the défilé, the parade.
Yes.
With that team and the IOC flag.
Oh, yeah. Well,
you were there in Rio?
There was a funny thing that happened. I was in the stands watching the opening ceremony with all the teams walking around the field. And the Refugee Agency's team, the Olympic group of refugees, they were scheduled to come in next to last. The last team in, the tradition was it's the home team. In this case, it would be the Brazilian team. Well, we were now 2 teams from the last, and now it was time for the next to last to come in, and there were 60,000 people in the stands, all going wild. Well, there were 3 of us from the UNHCR in the stands, and we looked at each other and said, these people are already applauding the refugee team, and they haven't even come in yet, but they're next. Well, of course, they weren't applauding the refugee team. They knew that right after the refugee team come the Brazilians. It was good luck. People were beside themselves with enthusiasm.
How did it happen in the team? Were the athletes very proud of being there, like overly proud to the point that they were motivated?
They were beside themselves. Do you know what that means to a young person? To be able to, first of all, you're part of the Olympics. You are, who is part of the Olympics as an athlete? They were over the moon. They lived like the rest of the athletes. They had a dedicated part of the village where they lived, with coaches and all. They all came. It was the 10 who came probably had 10 coaches. I mean, it was an organized thing. Mm-hmm. And of course, they were proud. We had a young guy from South Sudan who was in a camp in Kenya, who was part of the team. He went by his middle name, P-A-L, like Powell. He told us that he hadn't seen his mother. He was now 18. He hadn't seen his mother since he fled from the Sudan when he was 8. And he was in the camp from 8 to 18 at this time. One way or another, we got to his mother. We found his mother in the Sudan, and they got on the phone. I mean, it was tear-breaking.